Get out of here, Echo.
I just...
Imagine receiving a letter in the mail with half a human kidney inside. That's exactly what happened during the Jack the Ripper investigation when the From Hell letter arrived, taunting authorities and claiming the organ belonged to victim Catherine Eddowes. This gruesome artifact underscored the killer's chilling confidence in surgical cruelty. How did this act of intimidation shape the investigation? And what does it reveal about the mind behind the murders? The streets of Whitechapel in 1888 held a particular kind of desperation. Poverty pressed in from every crumbling brick and grimy window, a daily reality for thousands. Women, especially those without family or steady work, faced a brutal choice: find money for a bed in a common lodging house, or sleep rough and exposed. On the night of August 30th, Mary Ann Nichols found herself in that exact trap. She had been turned away from her usual lodging because she was a few pence short of the required 4 pence for a bed. She told the deputy, "I'll soon get my DOS money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now," referring to the new straw bonnet she wore, and walked back out into the dark to find the needed coins. Her last known movements trace a short, tragic path through the fog that had settled over the city. She was seen at approximately 2:30 a.m. on the Whitechapel Road, likely still attempting to find a client. The fog would have muffled sound and blurred vision, creating pockets of complete isolation on the otherwise familiar streets. Just over an hour later, at about 3:40 a.m., a carman named Charles Cross was walking to work down Bucks Row, a narrow, ill-lit thoroughfare. His footstep echoed in the quiet, pre-dawn hour. In the dim light, he noticed what he first took to be a tarpaulin lying against a gateway. As he drew closer, the shape resolved into a woman lying on her back, her clothes disarranged. He called over another passing workman, and together they saw the glistening dark pool spreading beneath her neck. They immediately found a passing policeman, Constable John Neal. He arrived with his lantern and confirmed their grim discovery. The initial assumption was a straightforward, if tragic, case of a drunken woman who had collapsed. The quiet street, the ordinary sounds of the city beginning to stir, everything suggested a common, sad end to a hard life. But when Constable Neal lifted his lantern to get a clearer look, the reality shattered that assumption. The light revealed a deep, brutal cut across her throat, a wound so severe it had nearly severed her head from her body. The cut was clean, confident, and executed with a horrifying degree of precision that immediately signaled this was no ordinary attack. This single, deliberate act of violence established a method that would soon become a terrifying signature, marking the start of a hunt for a predator whose confidence was as sharp as his blade. Just 1 week after the death of Mary Ann Nichols, the killer returned with a chilling new level of confidence. On the morning of September 8th, Annie Chapman's body was found in the backyard of 29 Hambry Street. In contrast to the relatively swift attack on Nichols, this murder showed the killer was willing to spend more time at the scene, despite the increased risk of discovery. The yard was small and accessible, yet the killer remained to carry out significantly more extensive and careful actions. The mutilation this time was not limited to the throat. The killer had opened the abdomen and removed certain organs. The specific way the cuts were made suggested a practical knowledge of anatomy. The uterus and part of the bladder were taken away with a degree of skill that pointed to someone familiar with surgical procedures or dissection. The body itself was arranged with a disturbing sense of order. Her legs were bent, her belongings were neatly placed at her feet, which echoed a clinical, almost methodical approach rather than a frenzied attack. This display of anatomical focus stood in stark contrast to the first murder. With Nichols, the act appeared focused and efficient. With Chapman, it was detailed and purposeful. The removal of organs shifted the possible motive from pure violence to something more complex, perhaps a desire to collect trophies or even a twisted sense of scientific curiosity. This escalation signaled that the killer was not just repeating a pattern, but refining it, becoming more audacious with each crime. The precision of these actions strongly hinted at a background where such cutting was practiced. It indicated a person who was not learning on the job, but rather applying existing knowledge in a horrifying new context. This progression from a deep throat wound to deliberate organ removal created a terrifying anticipation for what might come next. It suggested a murderer who was growing bolder, more controlled, and far more dangerous with each encounter, setting the stage for a night when that confidence would be pushed to its absolute limit. The night of September 30th brought a new level of terror to Whitechapel. At approximately 12:45 a.m., Elizabeth Stride was seen standing with a man in the doorway of a club on Berner Street. A witness noticed the man was well-dressed and wore a dark coat. They appeared to be talking, and then the man pulled Stride into the shadows of the courtyard. The witness heard a brief sound, something like "no," but thought little of it at the time. Minutes later, another man driving a cart entered the same courtyard. His pony shied at something dark on the ground. He stepped down and found Elizabeth Stride's body, her throat cut but with no further mutilation. The cart had entered the yard so soon after the attack that the killer would have had to flee immediately to avoid being seen. This interruption likely frustrated the killer's usual method. The murder was incomplete, lacking the surgical work displayed in previous attacks. The need for haste forced an abrupt departure. This partial act appears to have created a powerful urge to complete the intended violence. The killer moved quickly to Mitre Square, nearly a mile away, and within the hour found Catherine Eddowes. She had been released from police custody just after 1 a.m., having been arrested earlier for public drunkenness. In the darkness of the square, the killer had both time and complete privacy. The attack on Eddowes was the most extensive yet. Her throat was cut, her face slashed, and her abdomen opened with a series of precise incisions. Her uterus and one kidney were removed. The killer took his time, demonstrating a chilling focus and control despite the close call just moments before. This was not a rushed act, but a deliberate, unhurried display of surgical brutality. The level of mutilation showed the killer's full capabilities, as if making up for the earlier interruption. The discovery of two bodies in one night, within such a short time and distance, shattered any remaining sense of safety. It proved the killer could strike anywhere, at any time, and with terrifying speed. The double event created a wave of panic across London, convincing the public that the police were powerless against this shadow. This escalation showed a murderer who was not only skilled, but also adaptable and relentless, pushing his methods to a terrifying new extreme and leaving a city gripped by fear. The police investigating the Whitechapel murders received hundreds of letters from people claiming to be the killer. The majority were obvious hoaxes written by members of the public or journalists seeking attention. This created a massive problem for the investigation, as detectives had to spend valuable time and resources sorting through this flood of false information. Separating a potential genuine clue from the sea of cruel jokes became a daily, demoralizing task. Then on October the 16th, a particularly disturbing letter arrived at the headquarters of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, a group of local citizens. The letter was postmarked from London and had no return address. The handwriting was crude and the spelling was poor. It was signed "From Hell." The writer claimed to have sent half the kidney I took from one woman, stating the other half had been fried and eaten. Inside the small cardboard box was a portion of a human kidney preserved in wine. This kidney matched the one removed from Catherine Eddowes during the murder in Mitre Square. A doctor who examined it noted it displayed signs of a specific kidney disease, Bright's disease, which Eddowes was believed to have suffered from. The organ also appeared to have been removed by someone with some anatomical knowledge, supporting the theory the killer had medical or surgical training. The police could not prove it was definitely from Eddowes, but the timing and the details made it a strong possibility. This communication was more than just a boast. It was a direct taunt, showing the killer was not only aware of the police investigation, but was confident enough to engage with it. He was playing a game, sending a piece of his victim to the very people trying to stop him. This act revealed a psychological need for notoriety and a desire to insert himself into the narrative, to control the fear he had created. It provided a rare, chilling glimpse into the mind of the murderer, suggesting a person who derives satisfaction from the public panic and the police's frustration. This act of sending physical evidence from a crime scene was unprecedented, pushing the investigation into uncharted and horrifying territory. It raised the stakes immeasurably, demonstrating that the killer's audacity knew no limits and foreshadowing that his final act would be his most shocking. Mary Jane Kelly's room in Miller's Court represented a small step up from the desperate conditions many faced. She rented a single room at 13 Miller's Court, which gave her a door she could lock and a degree of privacy the other victims did not have in their final moments. This privacy, however, became the factor that allowed the killer to commit his most horrific act. For the first time, he did not need to work quickly in a dark alley or courtyard, glancing over his shoulder for approaching footsteps. He entered a private space behind a closed door with all the time in the world. Neighbors reported hearing singing from her room late into the night of November 8th. Some heard a woman's voice singing, "A violet I plucked from my mother's grave," around midnight. Later, just before 4 a.m., a resident of the court heard a single cry of, "Oh, murder!" but dismissed it as nothing unusual in the neighborhood. The sound suggested a night that began normally, even cheerfully, before it ended in absolute silence. When the landlord's assistant arrived the next morning to collect rent, he found the door locked and received no answer. He looked through a broken window, pushing aside a cloth that covered it, and saw the devastation inside. The scene that met police was unlike anything from the previous murders. The killer had used the complete seclusion to carry out an unprecedented level of mutilation. The attack was so brutal and thorough that it took hours for officials to properly document the scene. The body was nearly unrecognizable, and the violence displayed a freedom and thoroughness that outdoor crimes could never permit. This final murder represented the peak of the killer's confidence and brutality. The private setting removed all constraints of time and exposure, allowing him to fully express his intentions without interruption. It was the ultimate escalation, moving from rushed attacks in public spaces to a prolonged, methodical act behind closed doors. The horror of the scene left investigators with a profound understanding of the killer's capabilities, but it also marked a stopping point. After Mary Jane Kelly, the canonical murders ceased, leaving behind a scene of ultimate violence, but also the deepest silence, forcing investigators to confront a mystery with more questions than answers. Each crime scene left behind physical evidence that should have provided answers. Investigators found items like a blood-stained apron near Catherine Eddowes' body and personal effects arranged near Annie Chapman. They collected what they could, but the methods available in 1888 were severely limited. Police had no way to analyze blood samples beyond basic observation. They could not lift fingerprints or perform DNA testing. Photography of the scenes was in its infancy, and evidence handling followed no standard protocol. These limitations meant that clues which might convict a killer today remained meaningless fragments then. Witness statements created more confusion than clarity. Descriptions of the man seen with Elizabeth Stride varied from a respectable gentleman in a dark coat to a foreign-looking man wearing a deerstalker hat. One witness described a man with a dark mustache and a wide-awake hat, while another recalled a younger man with a fair complexion. The reliability of these accounts was questionable. Many witnesses came forward days or weeks after the events, their memories influenced by newspaper reports and public gossip. The foggy, gas-lit conditions of Whitechapel streets at night made accurate identification nearly impossible. The killer's apparent knowledge of human anatomy stood as one of the most consistent clues. The precision of the wounds, the removal of specific organs like the uterus and kidney, and the clean, deliberate incisions all pointed to someone with surgical skill. This suggested the killer could be a doctor, a medical student, a butcher, or even someone who had worked in an abattoir. This was not the work of an untrained amateur. The geographic pattern of the murders also offered a clue. All 5 canonical killings occurred within a very small area of Whitechapel, a 1-square-mile zone of narrow, interconnected streets and courts. This indicated the killer knew the area intimately, likely living or working within it. He moved through its alleys with confidence, suggesting a deep familiarity with its layout. There was also a sense that the killer understood police procedures. The timing of the attacks, the choice of locations that offered quick escape routes, and the apparent knowledge of patrol routes all pointed to someone who might have had some interaction with authority. He seemed to anticipate their movements. Modern investigators continue to examine these same clues with new technology. They analyze letters for DNA and study census records to match the geographical profile. Yet the same questions remain. Was the anatomical knowledge professional or self-taught? Did the killer live in the area or just frequent it? These enduring clues continue to fuel speculation because they are all we have. They point toward a portrait of the killer, but never quite complete it, leaving his identity as elusive now as it was over a century ago. The Whitechapel murders show us how fear grows when answers never come. This case forced police to develop new methods, from crime scene preservation to systematic evidence collection. It changed how people saw urban violence, making cities feel less safe. While the killer's identity remains unknown, his actions shaped our understanding of serial crime. His legacy lives on in modern criminology, reminding us how much investigative science has advanced. Even without a name, his shadow still influences how we study and respond to those who hunt in darkness.